understanding myofascial release and how we can use that to help you with your health problems. Myo means muscle, and fascia, well, that's a connective tissue system throughout the body. It's sometimes described as a web. It's intricate, goes everywhere. It goes even to the periosteum lining the bones. It goes all around our organs. Every tiny microscopic muscle fibre is enveloped with fascia. It goes into our nervous system, even to the edges of our nervous system. So fascia is a physical tissue. When I trained, I think someone said, look, there's a chapter on a couple of pages on fascia, go home and read it, but don't worry, no one's going to test you on it. And in fact, I can remember being somewhat shunned actually by being too open with a surgical colleague of mine who said to me, well, what are you interested in these days? And I said, well, I'm getting really interested in fascia because I was observing patterns with patients and going, why is it so many people who have whiplash start to get, indigestion problems? Well, perhaps that's the esophagus getting wrenched as it gets braced by the diaphragm. And as we wrench our head back, there's not just, the standard physio thing would be, well, what's happening to the muscles because their head's getting whipped backwards and forwards, and what's happening to your facet joint because it's getting compressed, and did you damage the disc? And that's where it ends. And I'm like, okay. If you talk to a neurologist, he sees the world through a neurologist's eyes. If you talk to an orthopedic surgeon, he sees it through those eyes. And we all have to sort of break things down to study them. But our biggest problem is we don't bring them back into the fact that we're a human being and that actually all of them exist. We have to try and get rid of that bias. The beauty about the fascial system is it's a wonderful way of bringing everything together because it talks to all of it. And in fact, now, this surgeon said to me, well, what are you going to do about that? Get them to swallow a large bolus of food? And I just thought, okay, right, I've said too much. And then, hey presto, the referrals dried up. Anyway, about 10 years later, when the whole world's talking about fascia, all of a sudden I started getting more referrals because he thought, well, there's somebody who's been working with this for about a decade and maybe it might be useful. But now I recall being at a fascia symposium a couple of years ago where some research was shown that there are photons of light passing through the fascial system. It's not just a mechanical system. There is information being passed through this system. And communication of information, or the breakdown of communication of information, or restrictions within the fascial system must have some impact to do with not only mechanical movement, but also how information is being transmitted around the body. And so if one organ is also potentially communicating with another organ, not just via the nervous system, but via this fascial system, well, when we get restrictions within the fascial system, what is that doing for our health? Interesting. So certainly approaches of viscerofascial release, which I've done, myofascial release, craniosacral therapy, which I think overlaps with this, forms of light touch therapy, which I use, indirect myofascial release. It's a beautiful way of seeing the body as a system and how changing something in one place can have an effect elsewhere, either from an information point of view or simply from a mechanical point of view. Why might someone we see so often get back pain and irritable bowel? Well, your bowel is actually connected to quadratus lumborum and to the underside of your diaphragm. There are physical anatomical connections which so often get ignored. There is a connection. And if we tighten a muscle, what's that going to do to the ascending colon or descending colon? It's going to have an impact. Well, if you change the tension in the structure of the bowel, what's that going to do to bowel health? Yeah, I really think it's powerful when we start to see the power of fascia and connective tissues. They're not just connective tissues. And there was I think a headline in one of the fascial symposiums, which I thought was brilliant. And it said, if you can't connect the issues, think connective tissues. Makes sense, right? So you've got a bunch of things that every doctor thinks is a separate thing. Well, I'll send you to an oncologist for that, or a gastrointestinal surgeon for that, and somebody else for that, and a neurologist for that. Well, how about we start seeing these things as being connected? Yeah. So if you can't connect the issues, think connective tissues, think fascia, and think how is this related to another thing mechanically or through information. Hi, I'm Roger. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons.